Today, we've got the final best case scenario for the Dems and the Republicans in the upcoming governor's elections. There's only two states, of course, New Jersey, Virginia. We've gone through this a bunch of times, and now we're actually coming up on that election. So first, this is the best reasonable case scenario for the Dems. Let's start in Virginia here. Of course, this is Spanberger and Sears. I've said it many times, it's just a big uphill climb here for the Republicans with Trump in the White House. The shutdown with a lot of government workers in Northern Virginia, that should provide a bounce for Spanberger. Plus, Sears doesn't seem to be a super strong candidate. Now let's see where things are at on the market. It's basically 90% chance here for Spanberger to at least win this race. Even if she wins it by 0.1%, that's still a win. Sears is only at about 9 or 10% here. And there's even stories like this coming out about Sears that says her schedule as lieutenant governor has been empty for months. Now maybe there's more to it. Either way, that seems kind of odd. She's a statewide official. You'd think there would be more on her official schedule. Now here's some early voting numbers out of Virginia. This is by state house district. And the ones closer to the top are the ones that have returned a higher number of ballots already. This state has 45 days of early voting. That is an absolute ton. I think it's actually too much. So it does look like the Republican districts have returned more ballots here. If you go down to the lower districts, then you see that there's more that favor the Dems here. Now, even though this looks like it favors the Republicans, again, keep in mind the state does lean blue, and keep in mind that early ballot returns don't necessarily tell you how people are going to vote. But given the level of polarization, most people are going to vote the party line. So let's take an updated glance at the polling. This is updated through the 23rd, and Spanberger is ahead by 7.7. In the individual polls, she's ahead in every one of them. In most of them now, she's actually clearing 50%. Sears is mired in the low, maybe the mid-40s at best. A lot of the polls from October here are from partisan pollsters. Even the ones that you'd think would favor the Republicans still show Spanberger in the lead, sometimes by a more competitive margin here, like this one from Quantus Insights. She's up by 5. So anything could happen. But if we go back to the map, given all the factors at play here, it does seem likely that Spanberger is going to win. But in her best case scenario, how far does she go? Well, considering my safe rating is 10% or more, I don't think that's an entirely unreasonable margin anymore. 8 to 10 months ago, I thought a little bit different. And of course, if Harris was in the White House, then this could be a totally different race. But for now, if Spanberger overperforms, I think she could hit 10, 11, maybe even 12 points. At least that's what I think is reasonable on her best case scenario. Now let's talk about New Jersey. This should be the more competitive race, even though theoretically this state is bluer. I think after the last presidential results, that kind of caught everybody off guard here. Plus, when you combine it with the last governor's election in 21, Republicans hoping that they're going to be undercounted here. However, we've got some stories like this that have Democrats that are crossing over and supporting Chitterelli. Now this is from a few days ago. I think more have come out since. And it's not a huge list, but we've got 7 of them listed right here. But if we take a look at the polling, right now in the aggregate, Cheryl is at about 5.3. So that's a win, but it's still kind of competitive. Here we've got Cheryl hitting 50% in a couple of polls, but again, some of these, most of them actually, are pretty partisan. I think in the final few days, we'll get a few more from neutral pollsters. But it's undeniable this race looks tighter than the Virginia race. And what about in the markets? Well, Cheryl is at 80 cents, Chitterelli about 25. That's a distinct advantage for Cheryl. So if we come back to her best case scenario, it's easy to say she's going to win. But how high could it get? Well, I think if she had a pretty solid night, it would get close to 10 points, but I think it would still fall just short. Probably 9.5 points is where I'm at, so that's technically going to be a likely margin, not safe. I think I'd be a little bit more surprised than not if Cheryl managed to hit 10 or 11 points. So that is the scenario for the Dems. Easy calls. They're going to at least win both those seats by more than 5 points. Virginia would be a flip and a pickup. Now let's do the best case scenario for the GOP. So everything we just looked at is pretty much the same. Sears could have some late momentum, similar to Glenn Youngkin 4 years ago. And the best case scenario for the Republicans here is they win the race for Attorney General with Jason Miyares over Jay Jones. That's an entirely realistic scenario at this point. Seems more likely than not. Then they're going to have to hope that that scandal with Jones carries over to the governor and lieutenant governor race and drags down the Democratic candidates. It seems like that's not happening much, if anything. Even if Spanberger takes a slight ding of 1 or 2 points, it doesn't look like that's going to do a whole lot here for Sears. So the bottom line in Virginia is I don't think Sears is favored to win even if she has a great night. But in that scenario, it would become extremely competitive. That means the polling is going to underestimate Sears and overestimate Spanberger. The motivation from Republicans in the Trump base is going to be unaccounted for, and they're going to surge on election day. That's reasonable in this scenario, but it's still not going to put Sears over the top. If she actually won this thing, I would be pretty surprised, and that would be viewed as kind of a major upset. In this scenario, I don't think it's impossible. I just think that it's clearly unreasonable. So my rating here is going to be the same one I had last time. It's going to be a tilt for Spanberger. So if Sears actually lost by less than 1%, that would be a pretty notable storyline. But what about in New Jersey? This race should be a little bit more favorable for the Republicans. Now, early in-person voting has just recently started here. In this scenario, Republicans are going to get a ton of the Trump turnout. Hispanic support is going to stay with Chitterelli. Independents are going to break hard for him, and Mikey Sherrill is going to be dragged down by Phil Murphy and maybe that scandal of her not walking during her Naval Academy graduation. So this is not the final prediction, but in this best case scenario, if the polling does underestimate Chitterelli and there is an election day surge and voters want some change in the Garden State, then I do think Chitterelli is poised to flip the state. Now, how high is it going to get? That's a different question. It's really tough to say right now. I want to see all the final polling and the data, but in this scenario, he is going to flip the state. I don't quite think it would hit 2 points. So I'm going to say this would be about 1 point, and that's going to be a tilt margin for Chitterelli. Now, maybe he does have a massive surge and he wins it by 2 or 3 or 4. That gets back into unreasonable territory for me right now. So this is kind of borderline tilt leans for me. It's probably about 1 to 2 points. And I would hope even Mikey Sherrill herself would think that if Chitterelli has a good night, that he could win this race. She should not take it for granted. Pretty much everybody underestimated Republican support in this state in the last election. Again, if Harris were in the White House, then Chitterelli would probably get a few more points here and he'd be more likely to win. But as it is, in this scenario, I do think Chitterelli would flip the state in his best case scenario. But hey, this is just everybody's best guess. Anything could happen. But for now, this is the final best case scenario for the Dems and the Republicans in the governor's races. So let me know in the comments. What do you think about these two scenarios? How likely do you think Spanberger is to get it over 10 points? Do you think Sherrill could also hit double digits? What about Sears if she has a great night? Could she actually flip the state, or would it just get much more competitive? And what about Chitterelli in New Jersey? If he has a solid election day, you think he could win the state? If so, by how many points? Could he get up to 2 or 3 or more? Let me know how your best case scenarios look down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.